If you're just joining us, Assalamu alaikum, good evening or good morning in Sara's case. Assalamu alaikum everybody, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today's Thursday, isn't it? Yes, I had to remind myself being in lockdown. I'm like, what day is it today? Thank you everyone. If you're just coming to join us, come in. Welcome everybody. Okay, I think we're good to go. I think I'll just admit all the co-hosts will admit anybody else coming in shortly if they're a bit later. Wonderful. Okay, so Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Thank you very much for being here today. My name is Annie McCann. I'm the co-founder of this network called the Right Pen Collective, which was founded by myself, Uzka, and Aksen, our co-host. Wave to camera. Hey, ladies. Salam. We created this network a few months back now in an effort to connect, support, and empower Australian Muslim writers, particularly here in Australia, in an effort to see more published works by Australian Muslim writers on our bookshelves, as commonly as we see Vegemite on supermarket shelves. I love that line. I keep saying it all the time. I would first like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land in which we are meeting today. Specifically, I'm coming to you live from the land of the Darug people of the Eora Nation. I would also like to extend my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledging that the land that we are on today is stolen land and sovereignty was not conceded. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's panel, which is what we like to call the Loving Muslim Oz YA. Being an avid Oz YA reader myself, I'm very excited to be presenting this panel and hosting it for you. So, can I just make sure everybody's on mute, please? I think everyone would have been on mute before. Let me just make sure. Yep, everyone's on mute. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so I'd like to introduce this panel without further ado, but before we continue with that, I'd just like to remind everybody that if you have any questions for us and for our special guests, please send them to me in the chat. My name tonight is The Right Pen Collective. I should be on the top of your chat. And please ensure that comments and questions that you do send through are respectful. Any form of abuse or disrespect will not be tolerated and you will be removed from the panel. So tonight, I'm very excited to be introducing to you my three guests, Demet Divaroren, Rawah Arja, and streaming to us live from an ungodly hour, I have to say, all the way from the US, Sara Haghdoosti. Assalamu alaikum, ladies, and welcome. It's very exciting to have you all here. Look, I've said your name, but I would like for you to introduce yourselves one by one, because I think you could do it justice more than I can. Demet, if I could start with you. Tell us who you are and talk to us about the work that you've done today. Yes, that's you.
Thank you, first of all, for having me here tonight at this lovely hour when usually I'd be half asleep on the couch. So bear with me, everyone, while my brain wakes up. I'm a writer, an editor, and a workshop facilitator. I mean, there's many labels that I can attach to my name, but we'll just go with that. I've been writing for about, I don't know, 12, 13 years, and I've published 2 books. One was in 2014, I co-edited an anthology called Coming of Age, Growing Up Muslim in Australia, right there. And in 2017, I published a young adult novel called Living on Hope Street. So yeah, I do a little bit of everything, I guess, short stories, etc. And yeah, that's really about it. I don't know if I've done it justice, Annie. I reckon you would have done enough.
Oh, no, Demet has a wealth of experience in years of writing and editing, so we're very honoured to have her on our panel. I'm just going to flash the cover of Demet's book on our screen. That's Living on Hope Street. That's what that looks like there. And I'm also going to flash the other book that she co-edited with Amra Pejic. Did I say her name right?
Yeah, Amra Pajalik.
Thank you. Sorry, Pajalik, sorry. And that's the new edition. So the one that I sort of pointed at was a fairly older one, and then it got reissued a few years later called Growing Up Muslim. So that's what you'd be looking at in the shops. So that's Demet. Thank you. So to Rawah Arja, you are a debut novelist. Congratulations and welcome. And you're streaming not very far from where I am, although we can't see each other. But Rawah, tell us a bit about yourself and the book that you've published this year.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is really nice. To put it simply, I never wanted to be a writer, and yet I became a writer. I am also a teacher, and yet I don't really like children. And I don't really like public speaking, yet all I do now is some form of public speaking. That's me in a nutshell. But I've been teaching primary and high school for I would say over a decade. And I think most teachers would get this when I say there comes a point where we call it like the burnout, where you just feel as though like you just can't do it anymore. And it was actually in darkness, that's where I found writing, where I just started to feel a little bit lost in my adult years and tried to figure out why is that the case. And I actually found reading and books, I found a home there. And the students that I teach and the communities that I work in are from, unfortunately, really tough backgrounds and tough family life. And I remember one kid saying to me, like, I can't see myself in books. And that was just like a light bulb sort of switch in my mind when I was about 26 years old, which was about 7 years ago. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to make you see yourself. And that's how the F Team, which is my debut novel, came about. It was just to feel seen and make kids that I actually thought only 3 people would read it, which is, I thought just a few people and my cousins. And I wrote it for those kids that I work with. But yeah, that's my little bit of a backstory of why I sort of came to writing rather. So
I love it. I hate reading, yet I read books. I hate writing. I've written a book, and now you're a public speaker. I love it. And I don't believe you when you said that you were 26 7 years ago. I do not believe you when you tell me that. Oh my goodness.
My bones rattled, so fine.
Mashallah. I'm just going to flash on the screen. So this is Rawah's book called The F Team. So that's what that looks like there. And I like how they've got football there because I'm a very big NRL fan, but we'll get into that later. And last but not least, streaming all the way from the US, Sara Haghdoosti, welcome. Thank you very much for waking up at 4:30 a.m. your time to be here tonight. Mashallah, thank you so much. You are a debut author as well. Tell us a bit about yourself and the book that you wrote.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to be part of this discussion. I'm Sara, I'm an activist and I'm a writer. And for me, I've always loved writing, and growing up, writing was a huge escape and a way for me to process what was happening in my life. And then I think I got pulled into politics and kind of left my writing behind. And once I had my first child, I realized that I really wanted to get back to something that was such a core passion of mine. So I actually sat down and started writing Sunburnt Veils, and was very excited that it got to debut this year.
Very exciting. That's it right there. I have a bit of a soft spot for Sunburnt Veils because I had the pleasure of reading this as its manuscript. So I want to say a shout out to Wakefield Press for trusting me with the manuscript. So this is what it looks like now, if that's gone up. So that's what it looks like. And I want to show a cheeky photo because I was feeling a little bit cheeky one day and I decided to cosplay the front cover. So this is what I did on Instagram. There we go. That's me pretending to be the cover. I even got the eyebrow in too. Yes, there we go, matching with the top in the hijab. And also just very quickly wanted to show the back of the cover because this is the endorsement quote that made it to your cover. If you can actually see it, there we go. I'm just going to put that on the screen for you. There we go. So a well-rounded and strong Own Voices debut that captured my heart, captured my pain, but made me smile. And it really did. So that's Sunburnt Veils. Just a reminder that if any of you would like to purchase these books, which I highly recommend that you do, our festival partners are Better Read Than Dead. They are a bookstore based in Sydney, Newtown. I used to frequent that place a lot before COVID. They have a dedicated page specifically for our festival, so you can look that up. And thank you, Aksen, for putting that link in the chat. It was also sent out when we sent out the link for tonight as well. And so, get on there, get some books, and it's free shipping. So, and no minimums. That's very exciting. So as a reader, that's news to my ears. Thank you. Okay, so, and also if anyone has any questions, please send them directly to me to the chat. I'll make sure that we ask them for you tonight. Okay, so ladies, YA is an interesting, would you call it genre? Topic? Category? Category. Let's go category. So YA is an interesting category because some people say it's simply because of the age, the characters like, 13, 14 plus through to say 18, 19 years old. But sometimes it's not just that, it's also the content of the work that goes into YA. I guess in your opinion, as writers who are published in YA, what would you consider to be YA? And this is an open question to all the floor, so anybody can go first.
I think it's such a, it's like a minefield. But just to pick one, I would say being vulnerable, I think capturing that vulnerability, that fear on the page, and that self-doubt that I reckon has never quite left my side. I've absolutely got a very strong connection to my inner teen, and that really kind of, which is why I read so much YA. Forget writing about, writing YA. I love reading, characters who are just honest, and I think we lose some of that in adult fiction, and that's what really draws me to it. I reckon that vulnerability.
Yeah. Rawah, Sarah?
Yeah, I think anyone, no matter how old you are, what sort of point you are in your life, everybody can relate to this idea of coming of age, this idea of growing and finding growth, and particularly in those really critical and vulnerable years of your life. And even now, in my 30s, I only read YA. I love it. It's because I can get so lost in being an adult. It's a lot of stress. There's a lot of things that you tend to sort of forget who you are with a lot of things. Either it could be work, family, relationships, etc. And I think when I pick up YA, I just go back to calmness. And I know that's really strange because it's the most chaotic part of my life, and I probably wouldn't want to go back. But it's this really softness and tenderness of trying to find who you are, and that coming of age and that identity, and trying to figure out a few things in your life, and you sort of think that the whole world is over. And that any decision that you make, that means like that's it. I remember like just things like HSC, and going, if I do not make it into university, my life is over. I cannot do anything else. And so when I pick up YA and I go back, and I just think how innocent and how to some degree naive I was, and so I think everybody can relate to that, and I think that's why it still remains so popular. As a category, if you want to call it that. So
yeah, interesting. Yeah, Sarah?
Yeah, I agree with both of what's been said before. I also think that something that can be special for YA is, I know for me, I was writing for like my own like past teen self, and like Rawah, I know like you mentioned that you were writing for like the kids you were working with, and I think there's something to when you're writing for such a specific audience, it lets you be more vulnerable as well, and that really translates to people who are reading it. So I would say that's part of the magic of YA for me.
Definitely. Is it quite challenging to write to a YA readership when you're not a teen yourself? Or is it something that you can overcome either by reading other YA books or talking to other teens? Again, open floor.
I think for me, I didn't find that challenging. I like I said, I work with kids both in high school and primary school. And so it wasn't really challenging for me. And I think I'm a big kid at heart anyway. But I remember sitting in class, and my ratio to boys and girls was like 24 boys to like 6 girls in my classroom. And they only give me the naughty boys, the cheeky ones. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I could totally relate. And that's why they could never muck up in my classroom, because I knew their tricks. I knew all everything that they would do, all the little cheeky things. So I always could relate in that sense. But also I basically asked the kids that I was in the classroom with, particularly the boys, because my book is centered around boys and for boys. You know, they were always on their electronics or would rather play video games than read. And I said to them, why I was the same. And I remember the students almost freaking out when they knew when I was being honest with them and saying, yeah, I get it. Reading can be boring sometimes. I get it. Sometimes I want to play video games. Sometimes I want to watch TV. And then when I created that openness in my classroom and that safe environment, the teens and the young children that I was working with started to tell me things like, Miss, I really don't, it's not that reading, I don't like reading, it's I don't have any books. I don't know where to look for proper books. And that also sparked an interest for me. I said, okay, so what if I write a book for you? Jokingly, mind you, I did not want to write a book. I never thought I would write a book. And they said, yes, Miss, if you write it, we would read it. And so I accidentally fell into writing, but as a promise to them, I wrote it. But because I created that openness and that safety environment, I managed to now as a writer figure out and pick up things and themes that I could actually put in my novel. So.
Oh, just on that, Rara, I wanted to ask you, like during, I guess, your editing process or your writing process, did you actually hand your manuscript to your class while you were doing that to get feedback? I'm just very curious now.
No, what I would do is when I was sitting at my desk, and a lot of the characters that are in my book are based on the kids. So anytime a student would do something and I thought it was just hilarious, I'd pick up my pen and I'd write it in my notebook, and the kids would look at me and go, Miss, did you just write something in your writing notebook because you're going to put it in the book? I'm like, yes. And they totally were in on it, and they totally knew, but I didn't show them the manuscript because they were, I would say, 12 years old when I started and 18 years old when I finished.
Which goes to show, again, that writing is a marathon and not a sprint.
Absolutely.
So, absolutely. Yes, Sara and Demet, experience when you're writing a YA.
Well, as I mentioned before, I don't really struggle to get into a young adult headspace because the teen me, the one that hated her, you know, canine and no fangs and, you know, her frizzy hair and just felt absolutely naked wherever she went. I used to walk, like I used to literally feel so self-conscious and would think that everyone was just watching me, judging me, that I would walk very, very stiff and like just kind of in this state. That's to the degree of sort of self-conscious kind of the headspace that I was in. And well, I've made peace with that girl, but I'm really good friends with her now, whereas before I was very much in a battle with her. So I've learned to actually accept that she will always be a part of me. And I channel that when I was talking about vulnerability and fear and all of that stuff. That's what I really draw on the teen me to get that out. And I've written from like living on Hope Street, I've written from a 7-year-old's perspective up to, you know, 7, 15, 30, 60s, etc. So I don't like to box myself in when I'm writing, especially because I just really want to have fun with it as well and just and just challenge myself. But so, and I just want to say, whether I'm writing from the 60-year-old's perspective or the 7-year-old's perspective, again, it's the emotional space that I mine, and that's how I get my characters.
Sure. And just while we're talking to you, Demet, because you've edited a book and you've written it. So can you just maybe briefly tell us about the experience as an editor? Like, did that take you out of your comfort zone, being an editor?
Yeah. Remember, this was my first professional gig. I started writing in 2000. Oh, well, I won't give dates. All right, I'm 40. 2004. I was 24 years old, right?
40 and fabulous.
At 24 years old, and I thought, I started professional writing and editing diploma. I thought I would be published within 5 years. It took me 12 years to publish my first novel. So it taught me so much. But coming of age, growing up Muslim in Australia, was my first professional gig with a mainstream publisher. And 12 personal essays up to about 3,000-4,000 words each. I mean, we would get 10,000 word essays and we would have to kind of comb through it and find the story. It taught me so much about brevity. And I think that really helped me when I started writing Hope Street, because I could see, you know, the scenes were quite short, sharp, and sort of, yeah, just work together in that sort of rhythm. And that's what, so I really learned how to kind of structure and shape a narrative in that kind of, way.
No. Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you for that. Yes. Oh, and very quick question, I can't take that off the shelf. Is that you on the cover?
Yes. I would not have turned up to school that day if they said that my face was going to be on a bloody book. Oh my gosh, it's like so embarrassing. And I said to them, guys, please, I don't want my face on the cover. And they're like, well, it's not fair because everyone's face is going to be there and it's gorgeous. And I'm like, yeah, just stuff it, just do it. It's
We have some requests from the audience to bring the cover closer. Can I do that, Demet?
Yeah.
Okay. I just didn't want to ruin my display. Here we go. The lovely Demet, right there. How cute is she?
My
Isn't she gorgeous? Oh, we'll talk a little bit more about that with a little bit later. But thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was delightful. Thank you. Sara, over to you. So your book came out this year as well, and the content of the work that you read I thought was amazing. But in terms of like, YA coming of age, that experience, you know, writing that, how was that for you?
Can I just say something?
Oh, sure. Demet, go.
I'm halfway through, so please no spoilers. And I
no spoilers.
No spoilers, and I absolutely love her voice. Can I just say it's really vibrant and just really powerful, and same as your book, Rawah, like really amazing. That's it.
I just keep flashing these books to everybody. Yes. Sara, please walk us through. Yes, no spoilers, please.
Sure. I mean, I think similar for me, getting into the emotions behind the characters felt quite easy, and like that felt natural. I think the biggest challenge for me was remembering that when I was growing up, like Facebook had just come out, like, and how different tech is for kids these days, and like really trying to reckon with that around, all right, well, how does this actually change what you're doing? And like, so I did like some research on that. The book is also very heavy on references because that's part of how Tara thinks, so it comes out a lot in her voice. And at one point I had to like check myself on the first versions had a lot of references to Dawson's Creek and Friends, and I was like, wait, no,
that was our time.
That's not
sharing
what
our age, everybody. Now it's like what is that, Schitt's Creek? Is that TV show? Is that what everyone's watching now?
I love Schitt's Creek, please. If you haven't seen it, it just stole my heart and it broke my heart, and it is absolutely something that I would never watch. Anyway, I'm just shutting up.
Yeah. Yeah, but I hear what you mean, Tara. Like Sara, trying to get you know, into that headspace of what are teens doing today, and you know, they're not watching these things. Yes.
Yeah. So that was my biggest challenge, but the actual characters, the emotions feel really easy.
It's like getting in touch with your teen self. I hear that. A very important question I wanted to ask the panel: writing YA, presenting an authentic Muslim voice for a Western market in an age of Islamophobia. Was there a challenge? What did you do to overcome that? How do you sort of construct a character where you want to have your voice heard, but you don't want to be preachy, and you don't want to be standing on a podium giving a lecture, but you want to give a message that incidentally, we are Muslim, we have lives, we're not doing what you think we're doing. How do you work that into YA? Because it's a very heavy topic. It's very heavy, but you want to work that into a younger readership compared to adults. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and maybe how you structured characters around this. Anybody?
I think for me, I don't know if it's my dark sense of humor, but I use humor. It's just something that I do to cope with racism or Islamophobia. And believe it or not, or surprisingly, people, the more you speak to people, like the Muslims, the young, the community that I was working in, it's not funny. Racism isn't funny. Islamophobia isn't funny. But if you find a way to take back power, I think humor can do that. And rather not let the other side sort of, it's like a power struggle or a power disadvantage. But if you laugh it off in a way, because that's what most 16-year-olds do, 15-year-olds, it's too complicated to deal with in a way that adults can and emotionally process that sort of information. And the more I spent time with teenagers, the more they would pick out the funny in it. And I thought that was hilarious. And I thought, okay, so I sort of deal with things I pick out the racism and the Islamophobia in a humorous way. So just a real quick example, my opening chapter is at the media is swarming around Punchbowl Boys, a notorious school that it's known for. It doesn't have the best reputation, but the boys are sort of stuck inside, and it almost feels like a prison. And all these media outside, and there's constant stories and negativity, and yet the boys on the inside only can notice the hot blonde reporter, and they're all making bets to get her number.
All boys.
And it's like their whole world is burning around them, but they just noticed that hot blonde reporter. They're like, I need to get her number. And then that's my opening chapter. But it's really, you sort of have to come back to who you are and be authentic. When I first started writing, I was super preachy. I was like, Muslims aren't scary. We are normal. We bake cookies. Like, I was just trying to please so many people, and I lost who I was as a writer, and I didn't even know where the story was going. Credit to my publishers, Giramondo said, why did you set your book in the Shire, like in Cronulla? I said, because no one's going to read a book about some students in Punchbowl. And even as I said it broke my heart, because I to the publishing industry to write about Muslims from a Muslim perspective for Muslims as well. And I don't know what happened. I just sort of crumbled under the pressure, and I was like, no, I'm going to change the characters, and I'm going to, whitewash my own Muslim characters. That's what I did. And then I rewrote the whole story and set it back in Punchbowl. And my publisher said to me, you write best when you write about your hometown and your family. And I needed that little bit of a push, but once I didn't care anymore and didn't want to cater to anybody anymore, rather just stay authentic and true to who I was, I just found writing so much easier, and just the shackles they weren't there anymore. And I didn't want to write so people can tolerate Muslims. I wrote now with a different sense of perspective and celebrating Muslims, the communities that I'm from and things like that. And so that was the best. It was difficult, but it was a really nice learning sort of journey that I sort of went on. But yeah.
So much respect, Rawah. I have to say, like, remaining unapologetically Muslim in your writing without having to be preachy, I think is a very good message that you're sending as well. And that now brings me to Sara's book, with Sunburnt Veils. I read that book and I was like, wow, like part of like what she went through, I personally went through. It spoke to me, like, not to give spoilers away, but I remember, I'll tell a very short story. I was at a public literary event. I won't say who it was for or where it was, but I was at a literary event and I had all these books in my backpack. So you know where this is going, right? And I had this backpack on me, and I said to one of the people that were there, look, I'm just going to leave my backpack here. This is mine. I'm just going to get something signed. I'll be back. And the first thing she said in a joking tone was, that's not going to blow up, is it? And I just laughed it off and thought, yeah, okay, whatever, you're haha. But it was my non-Muslim friends was like, Annie, that's not cool. That should not have happened, like, especially at a place like this. But that was, it rings true to, some of Sara's writing as well. Like, the fact that people were just sort of assuming that, oh, okay, if there's a bomb scare and there's a hijab in the classroom, they're connected. And I was like, what? So yeah, talk us through that process and bits of what you covered in your story.
Yeah, I think Islamophobia is very much front and center in my book. And when I was writing it, there was two things I wanted to do. One was, I feel like my community was so vibrant and so diverse in terms of how people experienced Islam and how they related to the faith. And there was so little of that in TV or literature. It felt like we were seeing some of the same characters over and over again. So I wanted to try and explore some of that. And I also wanted to try and show people like how racism can be really different in different iterations. So there's examples in the book where they're very stark examples, like a bomb threat being called on Tara purely because she wears hijab, to much smaller things that happen. And it was interesting. When I wrote the first chapters, I like shared it with a few people. And I remember one person read it and was like, I don't understand why they like related to Jess, who was the person who called a bomb threat. And I was like, I would do this. And I was like, okay, well, let's add in some more context to like really understand and show. And like for me, trying to get that balance right, because to like not just be like, no, this is not okay, but to like be able to show it in a way that people would realize it's not okay while they were reading it by themselves was what I was trying to go for.
Definitely. Yeah. You nailed that, I have to say. And it's interesting. Yeah. Like your book is it draws true to life with what I was reading as well. There wasn't hype. There wasn't, less or more. It was, yeah. I think Sarah hit the nail on the head when it comes to the forefront of Islamophobia. And unfortunately, hijabi women particularly have, bear the brunt of this because we're very easily identified as being Muslim. And like another thing to relate to what Rawah was saying about humor and dark humor, another short story I wanted to add as well was I was actually going to a book fair one time with a backpack on my back, and I was running through the carriage to get to the front carriage where my friends were, and these people were mortified. They looked at me like with this terror on their face, and I turned around to them like, just chill guys, it's not loaded, it's all good. Like they just looked at me in such horror thinking I was going to attack, and I was like, just chill, we're good, but that's, yeah, and unfortunately that's what we've had to put up with. But that being said as well, with the YA readership, I think what you're saying too, it's quite important to have that Muslim representation in the YA readership, because when we were teens we didn't see that as well at all. So in terms of like the gap, because there's clearly a gap in the YA readership with diverse voices. Do you think that we're getting any closer at closing that gap, or is it still quite large to everyone?
It's definitely quite large. There's a gaping hole. And diversity is one of those words that I love and hate, because it's a double-edged sword. In one way, it presents a spot for you in the literary world, but in another, it makes you different. So by accepting the diversity card, you're basically saying, yep, I'm the other, and it's really frustrated me in my whole career, I guess, which is probably why I gravitated to a book like Living on Hope Street as opposed to my very first novel that I wrote and I worked on for the first 7 years of my profession, my journey, which was about, set in Meadow Heights, which is where, I don't know in what suburb in Sydney would be similar to Broadmeadows. Would that be like...
Having not been to Melbourne, I have no idea.
Sounds like Punch Bowl anyway.
Yeah, right? It's like an enclave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was very much about the Turkish community. It was very much about a girl who, not quite teen, not quite adult, I don't know what she was, so had no idea at that time. But anyway, it was very much channeling my own experiences. It didn't work. And also she was in a relationship with someone from a Greek background, and in that way I think I've kind of written myself into my own relationship at the moment, because my husband is from Indian Catholic Indian background. So we're a bit of a fusion, but that's a very special book to me, but it didn't work. It didn't work for a number of reasons, but I'm just going to fast forward and say, you know, Living on Hope Street was more representative of, like, if that book had have come out at that time with me, the person that I was, I would have, I would have been in a different place in my career, I think. And that is because everyone expected me to write a book like that. They expected me to fly that Turkish Australian flag, and it worked for me because it taught me how to write, and it taught me so many things. But Living on Hope Street is more representative of my very many identities, and that's, I think, subconsciously what I really wanted to do. And that, again, yeah. So I think diversity is just one of those words that I love to hate, and I wish I could get rid of it, because at the end of the day, we're writing human stories. We're not writing diverse stories. When I was reading your story, Sara, beautiful name, by the way. But apart from the references to her hijab, she could be absolutely any girl from any background. I know there's beautiful references to her culture. I love that. But, you know, you could easily transfer those details to, you know, another culture, yes, but she's a human being, and she's so universal. She's just a girl coming of age in this crazy world. So, anyway, so human stories first and foremost.
I love that. Human stories, replace that. I love it.
Yeah.
Human stories, because we are human. Our co-host and co-founder Arxen had a question for you, Demet. She'd like to know, is Living on Hope Street a real reference to Hope Street in Brunswick?
Everyone wants to know this. I have gotten emails about this. Like, teachers have said, we've got a bet going in the staff room. Is it the one in Brunswick, Footscray? It's nowhere. I deliberately left it sort of open because it's a street that you can find anywhere in Australia, personally.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I had a couple of questions from Uzka as well. I'll read them out shortly. But one question I really wanted to sort of touch on here is the fact that we mentioned that these books didn't exist and representative of us when we were teenagers. But I remember my teens very differently. I wasn't subjected to Islamophobia. I wasn't subject to racism or anything like that. Growing up in the western suburbs of Sydney, you know, first in, you know, near Parramatta, then heading over to Blacktown areas, you know, the schools really embraced multiculturalism. I remember, you know, performing the traditional Indonesian, you know, dancing and having all the costuming. It was really embraced, and being Muslim was really embraced. They even had a prayer room for us in my school, you know, for the girls, because I went to a girls' school. But I'm finding that this Islamophobia really started gaining momentum after 9/11, and the teens that are reading your books now were born in that era. So how important for is it, as I guess, as a writer and a reader in YA, particularly for teens, like Muslim teens, you know, being born in that time frame, to see themselves represented as just like everybody else in their books? Yeah, Rawah?
Okay.
I think it's so important. And like for me, like I was in high school during 9/11, and that was incredibly hard. I now talk to a lot of people who grew up in high school in the US during 9/11, and the stories I hear make my toes curl. But for me, part of the reason why it's so important was I dealt with a lot of casual racism when I was in school, and a lot of it was from like teachers. Like I had and it was like very subtle, right? So I was in an advanced English class and we read Great Expectations, and there was a class discussion, and I said I didn't get it because I didn't relate to the characters. I didn't understand why someone would want to sit in a room full of moldy cakes and rats running around after they were stood up. And the teacher assumed that I didn't understand the words in the book and called my parents and advised them that I should drop the class. And it was things like that, when it's coming from authority figures, that just makes you feel like, okay, I'm probably just not as clever as everyone else, and makes you internalize it. So I think like having books that talk about this so that there's other touchstones so that you can help recognize it when it's happening and realize like, oh, this isn't actually about me, is I think really important in terms of supporting kids of color.
Sure. Yeah. Rawah, you wanted to add something before? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I think for me is I had a personal experience when I was in high school. 9/11 was really difficult. I was in year 7 when that happened as well. And I, like Sarah, I automatically, even though I'm from Punchbowl, very multicultural, I still remember going to school and immediately sensing a shift from some of the teachers as well. Just looking at me differently, just, you know, the, like you said, the casual racism and things like that. And up until that point, I had no idea that there was even a problem with Islam in general. And it was just like my bubble was burst and my whole life changed. And I remember sitting down and my parents saying to me, from now on, I was 12 years old, there are some places that you just can't go to by yourself. From now on, you have to give me, I have, you know, when normal people like go to the beach, they just go to the beach if they're not from the area. When I go to the beach, I have to let my parents know, I have to let my brothers, to give them the address. I have to have a plan A to Z, just in case if somebody says something, what do I do? If somebody, you know, follows me, what do I do? So it's never just a simple trip now. And I remember getting sort of rearranging my life and getting used to things like that. And then Cronulla riots happened when I was 16. And just when I was finally starting to breathe again, the riots happened. And I just thought to myself, oh my goodness, this is like, you know, terrorism is horrible everywhere, but now it's in my backyard. And I felt like I couldn't breathe. And I remember a teacher coming from a school in Cronulla High School, a high school in Cronulla, sorry, and they wanted to do an exchange. So they said, let's get some students from, I went to Wally Park, all girls, but, you know, Southwest Sydney, and let's do an exchange just to break the barriers. But what they didn't take into consideration is that if the Cronulla riots happen in December, don't take a group of girls by train walking in the streets in February. It's still raw. It's very sensitive. It's still raw now. Like you can't even talk about it now. And I remember walking the streets feeling so frightened. It's a bunch of, there was 30 of us, most of us wearing the hijab. And I remember when we entered the school, no students spoke to us at all. I remember wanting to play handball at recess, and then they actually quite dropped the ball and walked off the courts. And that was really traumatic for me because I didn't know why I had done wrong, but I realized I was always going to be guilty by association, and I had to just get used to that. And that horrible experience actually inspired me to write a story between Punchbowl and Cronulla. So not all that.
Yeah, well, something good did come out of that, which was the F team, 100%. And I'm hoping, you know, inshallah, with more kids, not just Islamic community, but even outside the Islamic community, when they're reading, you know, books in the YA readership that have more authentic Muslim characters, the mindset may shift and it won't be so confronting, or it won't be, you know, so tense. When they see a Muslim, they can understand in real life that we're not all like that. And, you know, personally, I cringe, like, you know, every morning when I'm going to work and I see the headlines, Islamic terrorist, I cringe because I wear a hijab and I commute for an hour. And, you know, every day it's like, am I going to have someone throw an egg at me? Is someone going to spit on me? And I even like had that in a, you know, conversation, like, should I even take the hijab off? Like, I even questioned that myself. And then I thought, nah, true to form, I'm Muslim. That's not going to deter me at all. But I'm hoping, yes, with the younger readership, I feel, you know, when you start targeting that younger age, you know, hopefully it will start, hopefully in the generation will close the gap. So Uska had some questions, and I don't want to leave them out. Now, Uska said that Randa was the first in the Muslim fiction space because there was nonfiction written by Muslim before Randa. So Randa Abdel Fattah is who I'm talking about, and her book was YA. So all of you are published traditionally. Uska would like to know if your publishers are more willing to take risks in the YA space compared to the younger age group. And when I say risk, I mean risk with different themes or things like that. What was your experience going down the traditional publishing route? Demet, would you like to come in on this one? Oh, you're on mute. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, so publishers taking risks with YA as opposed to maybe children's fiction, like
Younger,
sort of. Yeah, I guess. I guess so. I can only really speak from, you know, the two books that I've really been associated with. And, you know, coming of age, growing up was in Australia was the first, not of the coming of age series, because the first of that was Alice Pung's Growing Up Asian in Australia.
Yes.
Many, many years ago. So I think I don't want to say they took a risk with that book, because what risk are they really taking?
That's right.
There's no bloody risk to take. They're just raising minority. Unfortunately, I'm using words like this, but just bear with me, even though I'm hating.
That's true.
They're raising minority voices, but they're not really minority voices. They're an important part of the Australian fabric and society. It's just that they're not given a voice in the mainstream literary or sort of television world, unfortunately. So Hope Street was a bit more risky. It's about domestic violence, it's about racism, it's about so many of those heavy kind of topics, and also kindness and generosity and what happens when people actually throw their labels aside and actually connect on that human level. So I would say, yeah, probably they are willing to take more risks in that YA space, I think, judging by what's coming out theme-wise as well. But specifically, I can't really, like Muslim voices, very much lacking. So
you're right. What risk is it to publish a Muslim voice?
Is it? You know, it's a good story, it's written well, it's entertaining. Guess what? It's not preachy, but it's still educational, like all books.
Yeah.
So you know what?
That's
just put whatever whatever sort of like, you know, stop hesitating basically. And hesitancy, is that the word?
From that just word. Put your hesitancy away
aside and see it for what it is. Don't think, oh, this is going on in the world and therefore this may not sell. The only way you're going to sort of bridge that gap is, I guess, in a way, taking that bloody risk.
Yeah. Rawah and Sara, was it the same for you? Did they feel that the work that you were trying to produce was too risky, or were you even asked to cull anything down or anything like that because of that situation? Or was it like, game on, let's do this?
I like I said, I was really lucky. So my publisher, Giramondo, this is the second book ever that they've published in the YA space. So they don't even do that at all. But they wanted to, Felicity Castagna, they had published her book in 2016. So that was the first ever YA. And then they and I'm friends with Felicity, and they took a risk with me, to be quite honest with you. It wasn't even finished, the manuscript. But I remember Felicity saying, look, just meet her. And I don't want to say I charmed my way to the contract. And so I basically said to them, in a really humble way, if you do not publish this story, you are going to regret it. In a non-threatening way, like in a really nice Muslim way. And so they were like, okay.
So yeah, good on you for actually believing in what you were doing and saying, you know what, this has got a life, this means something, and it's your loss. And I think
that's right.
And I think what you were saying before, like having to impress others and feeling that pressure to write a particular formula or to a particular audience and losing yourself, I think good on you for standing your ground and just raising your voice, because we're told not to. We're told to be really polite.
Yeah, no.
We're told to be, like that kind of crap, which unfortunately can set us back as women, set us back for, Sarah, go for it, Sarah.
I was just saying, I like how, Rawah's attitude is, you're doing yourself a disservice by not publishing my book.
And then a beautiful, a really powerful book came out of it. Like,
exactly.
They're raw characters. They're real characters. They're boys that I grew up with. They're boys that everyone should know because they have hearts and they're generous, and all of that is a facade because they're boxed in to to something, to a world, or they're boxed in a world, that has erased their identities. So what the hell are they going to do? Like, what are they going to do if they're vulnerable in front of you? Anyway, sorry, go on.
That's right, Sarah, something to add. Yeah.
I am going to channel Rawah energy.
I think we're all going to channel Rawah's energy. You're doing yourself a disservice. Publish my book. I love it. Sarah, please.
I think for me, I will say that I got really in my head when it came to like trying to talk to others about the book. I was like, this book is so political that no one's going to want to touch it. And then I remember for me, Christchurch happened and I was so angry and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to send it and see what happens. And like, I sent it to Danielle, who's my agent, who's amazing. And she just said yes. And then,
Danielle Binks.
Yep.
Yes, shout out Danielle Binks. Hello.
Danielle Binks, she's amazing.
Amazing.
And like Danielle loved it and got it and like was such a champion for the book that like my perception of how scary it was and then like how incredibly supportive Danielle was were just like two very different things. And I was also really worried about having someone who wasn't a person of color edit my book, and Joe Case from Wakefield was so great and got it and like was really, so like I also just want to share like I only have my own experiences, but I want to say like there are champions out there. And I think there are people who are really hungry for these stories. So if you do have something, go for it. And like, and if bad things happen, know that there's also a community to support you and rally around you as well.
100%. Yes, it's not always so bad, which is really good news. And, we've had 3 amazing authors that have published some fantastic books. So again, get onto this through Better Read Than Dead Newtown. The link is in the chat. It's free shipping. Definitely want to get onto this. Unfortunately, we only have a few minutes left of our session. I could talk to you ladies for hours because this is amazing. I'm feeling very excited to talk to you. Some fun questions I like to ask you because I love to do this with all my guests. Rapid fire. Don't overthink it. Just, the first thing comes into your head. So Demet's shaking her head like, please don't do this to me now. I love it. Oh, hilarious. Okay, very quickly, I'm going to ask you, think back to the work of fiction that you've written. So Demet, this would be Living on Hope Street for you, or the F Team, or Sunburnt Vales. Who is more likely to win a pie eating contest?
Kane.
Okay. Rawah?
Who's more likely to eat a pie eating contest?
To win at a pie eating contest.
As in me or my character? Who?
Your character. Which character?
Ibi, definitely.
Ibi. Sarah?
Mitra.
Sorry, who?
Mitra.
Mitra. I didn't hear you. Cool. Okay. Who is most likely to make money off their YouTube channel?
Us.
So which characters? Is there a character that comes to mind in your books that would make money off a YouTube channel, you think?
Anaya would in my book.
I think Ada or Ada.
Yeah. Rawah?
Us. I definitely Us.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. Sorry.
He's a hustler.
Who is most likely to be released from their kidnapper because they would not shut up?
Mrs. Aslan.
Ibi again.
Mitra again.
Mitra. And my last question for that, who is most likely to go on to the Olympics and win Olympic gold for Australia?
Oh,
Alex.
none of them.
Oh, love it. Okay, we have one question slip through. Thank you for your question. Oh, hang on, I'm just going to grab the chat. Sorry, my screen froze for 1 second there. Okay, thank you. We've got a question come through directly to me. I'm just going to make sure that I catch it before we end. Okay, this question came from Judith Ridge. Judith, thank you very much for your question. How can we encourage white writers and publishers to back off and seed the ground that belongs to Own Voices writers beyond not buying those books, but will still write inclusive books that don't whitewash Australian society? Because heaps of white writers still just do not get it. That's a good question. Thank you, Judith.
That's a heavy load.
Everyone's answering with a giggle. I like this.
I'm like, there's 4 minutes left.
How do we do this?
How do you do this in 4 minutes?
There's like layers and layers on this, right? Like, I think one thing I'll say is like a more systematic change approach is like, you gotta start with kids in schools and making sure that kids of color don't feel like they can't write, which like I was told in 101 unspoken ways growing up, and in some ways very explicitly growing up. And I think it holds writers of color back from trying and getting out there. So I think that's one way. And like, there is that dichotomy when we were talking about diversity, where it's like, you want to write about your own experiences because it's so easy to think that no one cares because of racism and everything we're told. And then you also don't want to box yourself in. And then, so like, it's just hard. And like giving writers the space to like be creative and try other things.
I think that's such a good point where it starts at schools, because in high school I was told that my literacy skills were poor, spelling, grammar, poor. And for a very long time, I didn't try. And even to this day, and I reckon it's a big part of why I started writing was to prove to myself that I could actually express myself, that I had the words. And it's really frustrating because it held me back, and it really did do some damage. But that's an excellent point. It all starts with education and to give kids confidence that they can express themselves.
Yeah, given the confidence that they matter. Rawah, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, absolutely. I think when I wrote the F team, I not only wrote it as a Muslim in terms of lack of diversity and representation, which is why that was where my passion was at, but I also wrote it as a teacher. And I would look in the curriculum and I strategically added some things in my book because I want it to be part of curriculum. I want it to be part of the classroom. As a teacher for teaching over a decade, that's where it starts. Even myself, when I was at school, I didn't believe I could become a writer because no book that I was reading had Muslim authors, or even people of color was so rare. So I actually genuinely thought that space I cannot occupy it. That's not where I'm supposed to be. And so if we integrate it more in the classroom and we have more of a diversity, maybe there's, instead of one person out of 30 kids in the classroom who wants to be a writer and thinks they can do it, maybe we'll get 10 because we've exposed them to that diversity. I know for a fact if I had diversity at school, because let's face it, a lot of these kids these days don't read when they're at home. That's just what it is. They look at reading as a school chore, and sometimes they read because they're forced to. They have to write an essay about it, there's a response. And so let's capitalize on that. If they have to do things at school and they're spending 6 hours, maybe expose them to some diversity, clean out the book room, like, you know what I mean? Add some things in classroom libraries. That way, even if they don't want to be a writer, they feel seen and represented. And then they have the courage and confidence to do, you know what, I can occupy space now and I can go for it. Absolutely, which is why I wrote the FTEM, because I wanted it to be in schools.
Good job, good job. Our co-founder, Akson, wants to ask you a question as well with the very short moment we have left. So while I bring her in, I have a very quick question for all three of you. NRL or AFL? Demet?
AFL.
Rawah?
I'm sorry, Rawah, but I missed half of the references to I was like,
I'm going to take a side road and say soccer.
I was going to say English Premier League.
Oh, you're
Right.
funny. Yeah, go NRL. We'll have to talk NRL later, Rawah, you know,
Yes.
teams and all that. As you can see, Parramatta Eels. Okay, Sister Aksan, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself and ask
Yes.
your final question to wrap
Thanks,
this
Annie.
amazing panel up.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Annie. Thank you so much. Thanks, Demet and Rawah and Sara. Now, moment of truth, Rawah. Does the high school you work at study your text now in high school? Do Islamic schools use your books?
Punchbowl Boys does. So the school that I wrote the book for, and the kids that I actually work with and I mentor, I'm also a youth mentor, actually use my book. And there's a few Islamic schools that actually do use it as well. But the Islamic schools were the ones that I was worried about because I have some swear words in there.
Yes, exactly. I was just wondering, I thought, would they be able to overcome that and actually use that as a discussion? Because that was something I couldn't.
No, they do, which is really silly if you think about it, because I think to us, even if you get to Islamic school, if you've heard the way these kids speak on the playground,
Yes.
it's very clean in my book, but they do, and they just cross it off. They just cross off the F words.
Yeah.
That's
So, yeah.
Thank you. Aksan, was that your only question? Just so I don't miss what you're asking. All good? Thank you so much. We had one last question that slipped through from a Musa Alamudi. He'd like to know which of your characters you would like to cosplay if you had the opportunity to. As you know, I've already cosplayed once. Is there anybody that comes to mind or you're like, nah?
Mrs. Aslan.
Mrs. Aslan.
I love it.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Oh, look, once again, ladies, I want to thank you so much, Jazakallah khairan, for spending your hour with us, an hour and 2 minutes. Thank you so much for spending your time. Demet, Rawah, and Sara, thank you very much for imparting your wisdom and your journey to publication with us. Once again, everyone, please get onto their books. They're amazing books. Better Than Dead do have them for free shipping. And I want to also thank the viewers for being here and for spending your time and sending us all your comments and questions. Thank you very much. It was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Assalamu
having
alaikum
me.
wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's so awesome. Thank you.
Sending love.
Thank you so much.